Okay, everyone, this is my spoiler review of X-Men the Animated Series Season 5, Episode 6, Jubilee's Fairytale Theater. This originally came out November 16th, 1996. Before I jump into my review, hit that sub button on YouTube, and if you're on TikTok, come over to YouTube and hit that sub button. It'll help me in so many ways. I'm also going to be reviewing X-Men 97, so you're not going to want to miss that. So this is a very polarizing episode. I mean, there's a lot of fans of this show who think this is by far the worst episode of the series. I don't think that. It's not one of the best. I'm kind of in the middle about it, so I'll break that down right now in the review. But you see it opens in the caves under the X-Mansion, so it's cool. We actually get to see those. And Jubilee, like she always is in this show, is left with the boring task, right? Like she's so frustrated that Gambit, Wolverine, and Professor X are going to go to talk with the president, and she has to stay back and bring these kids on a field trip and a tour around the caves, as she says, babysitting. So they'll get caved in, and until they get rescued, Jubilee realizes it's story time. Now, what works for me the strongest about this episode is how they'll pay off at the end that Jubilee was very smart in protecting these kids' psyche and making sure they weren't traumatized in something that should traumatize them, as Jean alludes to later in the episode. So I really like that. I like that it showed that side of Jubilee that's very caring and nurturing. I also want to know, because we'll see later in this episode, water starts coming in to the cave, and then Jubilee has to keep distracting the kids with the story as this is getting more and more intense and scary. Like, Professor X needs to answer for this. Like, there's a cavern down here where there's rocks that are caving them in, there's water breaking, and it's very dangerous. Like, he has to explain himself and get a plumber down there or something. He doesn't take any responsibility later in the episode. So with the story Fairytale that Jubilee will tell, we first see Princess Jean and Prince Scott, very fitting for their type of characters, and we see Magnus the Malevolent. That word kills me to say, and I said it right, thank God, but he wants to find the other half of the powerful McTaggart crystal. So we see Magneto's metal warriors chasing Gambit the Thief, and we see Longshot here. But what was so jarring to me, because I didn't know this going into the episode, that this would be a new voice actor for Gambit, and it's no disrespect to the new voice actor, but you're so used to the Gambit you've seen in the whole show, it's really different, like way too different, that it really brings this episode down for me. Like, it is lacking the charm of the Gambit we know in the show completely. It's just, it feels like a different character. It's definitely the worst part of this episode. And it's frustrating because this was towards the end of the show, so you wish things would have worked out differently where that voice actor was still doing the voice of Gambit at this time. Now, Jubilee is the hero of the story, and of course, because she's telling it. But what I like about Jubilee in this episode is we get to see her powers. I love her powers. I love the pyrotechnics. I love the fireworks. And this episode is the most we get to see them. So that is what I take away from it that I really liked in the part of Jubilee too, is not only her protecting these kids' psyche, but being able to see her kick a lot of butt and use her powers. And I like she does the smoking gun pose after she blows up one of the metal warriors. Now Logan the Troll shows up, and it sounds like Cal Dodd is doing Wolverine's voice, but like he put like marbles in his mouth or something. So Gambit, we learn, was hired by Magnus to find the other half of the crystal, but he knows who he's dealing with, how dangerous Magnus is. So he gave him a fake. He found the real one and hid it. And when they go to this cave where the other half is that Gambit found, this is when they run into Sabretooth, who just looks off. Like, it's just a weird design of Sabretooth. I almost wish they just picked a different villain for a type of medieval type character. It just didn't really make sense. Now, I love seeing in the woods Xavier the All-Knowing appear to them, like the Wizard of Oz. They learn that Jubilee is the key to all of this, and again, because Jubilee's the one telling the story, that's why you're going to see that. He says your own light of goodness will activate the gem when they combine the halves of it. It's the key to destroying Magnus. Now, it's also strange when Mastermind just trails them in the woods after this and calls Wolverine short stuff, but we don't ever see him again. He's just kind of there. Now, they get into Magnus's vault. They get the other half of the crystal they need now, but it's just a Magnus trap here. Then he gets the other half, gets Jubilee who he needs to activate it, and he basically threatens Wolverine's life if Jubilee doesn't do it. I love, though, that Magnus, once this happens and Jubilee activates the gem, he just fires, basically, all his Metal Warriors and destroys them. He's like, I don't need you guys anymore. And they had to do that, the writers, so they can get a moment for Jubilee to overpower Magnus without interference, which we see here, which was really cool. And it's making him too strong for his own self. And right there, when she has a big heroic moment, that's when it cuts to the present day when Gambit, Wolverine, and Cyclops are there to get these kids and Jubilee out of the cave. I like the kid meets Logan. He refers to him as Logan the Troll, and Logan's face was great. But as I had mentioned, the strongest point of this episode is at the end when Jean realizes the kids all seem fine after a traumatic event and that Jubilee should be applauded for thinking of telling a story like this and distracting them. And she tells the end of the story here where she is a princess with Princess Jean and Prince Cyclops, but she rejects that life because she has many more adventures to go. So it's sweet, but again, it's obviously not a great episode of X-Men the Animated Series. It brings a lot of points down for me. Really, I don't have a problem with the fairy tale part of it. I don't have a problem with a lot of time with Jubilee. I like both. I just really cannot take the replacement voice acting of Gambit. It just doesn't fit at all. It's so jarring. I get that some actors want to go different routes so they don't look like they're imitating the old voice, but I would have preferred a little closer. It just feels like a different character. So I'm going to give this one a 7. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment, try to respond to as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you don't miss one of my reviews of X-Men the Animated Series, X-Men 97. I'm also going to be reviewing more figures and statues of X-Men as well. And I'll see you next time.